Welcome to Tech Notice. I am super excited about this build because we're going to be building the ultimate small form factor creator PC. Like, it's got 12900K, RTX 3090 and an absolutely big chungus of a 360mm radiator. How the heck can we fit it all in a case? Well, let's find out.
Artgrid is an online stock footage platform that offers the highest quality stock video from HD to 8K, ProRes, log, and RAW formats. Active subscription provides you access to unlimited downloads and a royalty-free worldwide license. The license doesn't expire even when the subscription has been cancelled. Artgrid catalog is updated daily and the subscription can be configured to fit your needs. Get 2 months for free when joining Artgrid through the links in the description below.
First of all, we're going to start with the case. This case is called Johns Plus i100 Pro. And there's a few different colors of this. There's like a gray, silver type of thing, and then a black one, which we have over here. So on the top we have accessories box, and let me get this case out. Here's the case. It's absolutely tiny, like the tiniest case I have ever built in. But when I saw this case, I thought this looks so minimalistic, so cool, that I just want to build in it. Kind of solid front panel over here, and the whole chassis is kind of like a chimney style that you pull in cold air from the bottom and from the back and then push it out from the top. Inside the accessory box, it comes with feet. And then there is a riser cable as well. This is PCIe Gen 3, but because we're using RTX 3090, I've had to order an extra PCIe Gen 4 riser cable over here from Cable Mods. I'll leave everything that I'm talking about and building here in the description below if you want to pick anything up. So the top panel comes off like that. There is like a mesh panel, and there's a filter behind there as well. Both of these side panels are actually tempered glass and they're tinted, but you can get like solid ones or like a vented ones on the side as well. The vented ones don't make that much of a performance difference, so like going with glass ones is probably like the best choice to really show some of the hardware inside you have. You can take the side panels off by unscrewing the 2 screws on the top, and then it kind of slides up on both sides. Depending on the layout, how you want to put this over here, you have like different hardware. You can mount like a fan on the back of this case here as well. But at the moment, we're going to go with vertical GPU rather than the normal horizon or kind of normal layout. If you want to have the normal layout, you can actually mount the Noctua NHD 15 in here as well if you want to, you know, put air cooling, something like that. But we're gonna go liquid cooling because we're running a very hot chip. But basically you have a different back panel that you can use for this case. You have 4 feet on here, and then you kind of have like feet extensions if you want the feet to be a little bit higher, so your case is slightly higher off the ground, which means better, you know, airflow to the bottom. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to be like attaching those heights on the feet as well. Once you have removed the glass panel and side panels, the front panel, just you pull it up. The front panel comes off like that, just a solid panel. And underneath the front panel, as you can see over here, you can put a 3.5-inch, you know, hard drive if you wanted to, or another 2.5-inch SSD in here. And there's another SSD place on the front over here. So there is quite a bit of storage option there as well. This is not the smallest small form factor cases, but can be one of the best in terms of cooling capabilities. You can put a lot of cooling power in here. The cool thing is all the screws come in already like a labeled box over here, and I can see screw for case stands, meaning like the feet. So they will be in this section over here. And we're gonna take 4 of them out and screw the feet in. In our case, I have actually pre-built this already to check if everything fits and so on. I don't need to move anything in terms of this motherboard layout. Let's take the bottom filter off here as well. And then the filter just slides up. Next thing we want to do is build the actual motherboard. For this, we are using the ROG Strix B660 ITX board. And you might be saying, why are you using this board instead of the Z690? Because, you know, you're going with 12900K and, you know, that would work much better, wouldn't it? And yes, you could go with that motherboard, but I am not sure we could fit this cooler on the Z690 motherboard of this one, because it would just have two big heat sinks, and this bottom SSD heatsink over here, it just wouldn't work. Even in our case, we're gonna have to make some compromises to make this work over here, and we're not gonna use the included heatsink. Just a quick little note over here, if you want to go with the Ryzen system in this build and you don't want to go with, you know, 12th gen and DDR5, or you want to go with maybe DDR4 with 12th gen or something like that, I'm gonna leave a few different options in the description below, so you can go with Ryzen X570 or B550, for example, platforms, and maybe go 5950X instead of the 12900K, which actually kind of would make a little bit more sense if you wanted to, because it runs much, you know, lower temperatures than this 12900K. But just so you know, you don't have to stick with 12th gen for this if you want to do this build, but want to go Ryzen, you know, links in the description below. Let's install our CPU first. For the CPU, we are using nothing less than a 12900K. Double check that. Little wiggly pops.
Wiggle pop!
Take the cover off. Slide it down. And twist it in. Now about the SSDs. Now this is where it gets interesting. We can't actually use the included heatsink of this motherboard, and we have to use an SSD that has already like heatsink built into it. And I wanted to use something that is quite high end as well. So we're using a Gen 4 drive that is super fast and is able to go in here. And for that, we're using the Team Group Cardia A440 with the heatsink version. And the read and write speeds are up to 7000 megabytes per second, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And this SSD comes with a heatsink already, as you can see. I have already applied it. You can just apply it in the box. It comes separately. Now, our SSD is going to be cooled as well, because the heatsink of the included, you know, motherboard that goes over here, that kind of hangs over too much, and that's why we're using this. We're also gonna have to take this included thermal pad off that's underneath the heatsink, because otherwise we can't fit it down. And now we can pop our SSD in there. Now this is 1 terabyte in size, but you can get it at up to 2 terabytes in size if needed to. There we go. SSD has been installed, and it fits like perfectly in there. It just kind of touches the heatsink of the chipset on the bottom over there. The cool thing about this motherboard is that there is actually a secondary SSD slot on the back over there. There is also like the front panel kind of header extension. We're gonna take that one out as well. So if we flip the motherboard to the other side, we can install the standoff in the back over here and have another Gen 4 NVMe drive. Another 1 terabyte from Team Group. And this time it's Cardia Z440 drive. Very fast still, about 5000 megabytes per second, something like that, 5000, 4.4 to 5000 megabytes per second. But because it's Gen 4 drive, it's very good in random read and write speeds, but also the terabytes written spec for this SSD is very good as well. So install this standoff over here. It's kind of random or very hard to just use your fingers to screw that in because it's very small. It's funny, this drive already comes like kind of bent from the factory. I'm wondering what's happened to this one, but I think it's gonna be fine anyway. And then let's screw it in. We're not gonna install the RAM at the moment, but this motherboard still has like all the features we want. 10 gigabit USB-C front port. We have some SATA ports over here if needed to. So there's kind of these 3 screws that screw the side of this top bracket off. So we're gonna take this off like that. Make sure you don't lose all your screws that are all over the place. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with these Arctic coolers, but they have an absolutely huge radiator. And by huge, I mean it's super thick. It's like double the thickness of usual radiators or something like that. I've tried this previously. It's actually gonna fit. There's gonna be a little bit of trickery involved with it, but you can install it. If we are facing to the front over here, so if this is the front, then the tubes, you wanna go and put them through like from the front side, and the tubes kind of go out from that side. And then this radiator goes in like that. So we're gonna have to push it down a little bit. You'll have to guide these tubes a little bit. Believe me, it will go in. You'll have to do a little bit of squishing and squeezing, but it will go in there. So we'll push this down. Okay. There we go. So you're probably gonna want to get some screws going and then be able to kind of move this one side bracket still. If you can, use the washers for these screws over here on both sides, because you're gonna get a better grip on the frame. As you can see, it's pushing up a little bit on this right side, and you might be thinking, flipping heck, it's not gonna fit. But actually, you just have to like bend the tubes a little bit, because they come out very straight and they can go this way, but they just need a little bit of guidance and folding to go through there. I'm gonna put a few screws on this side as well. So as you can see, it was quite easy putting this in. Now it's flush and it's no problem over there. It pushes a little bit out, but the main thing is make sure that the tubes don't get stuck underneath those fans that are on the side. A little bit of force, but no problem at all. We're gonna have to put the power supply in there in a moment as well, so we'll prepare that. We're gonna take off this bracket. There's two screws over there. We're gonna put these inside there. And then there's two screws on the other side of this bracket as well. So we're gonna take that one out. Okay, so this top bracket is where our power supply is gonna be installed. For power supply, we're using Corsair SFF 750. So it's 750 watt power supply. It's 80 plus platinum, so very, very efficient. And it is tiny. This is so small. Take some of the cables out as well. So motherboard, CPU, and two PCIe cables. So in terms of orientation, I'm gonna put the fan on the back side, so it pulls the air in from the other side rather than on this side, because it's got more room to kind of cool down power supply. If the fan was the other way, then it would be too close to the glass. The cool thing about this case is that you can actually mount like an ATX power supply in here as well, but I don't really recommend it, because you're really going to struggle with space, because the ATX power supplies are so much bigger. I'd go for this Corsair one. It's small. You're going to get a very, good quality power supply. 750 watts of power. You can power anything with this. So the case power extension actually is here. So we're going to have to plug that one in on this power supply, and make sure you flick the switch, because later on it's going to be very, very hard to flick that switch. So all of these cables, I'm going to push through from the top, pull them out from that side. And this, let's see, what's this? Okay, that's the CPU power. It's gonna go out from there. And then the motherboard goes through there as well. And then the PCIe power goes underneath there, off to that side, and then out from the back. You're just really gonna have to squish this guy back over here. This is the time to put the RAM in here as well. So I'm using DDR5, because this motherboard supports only DDR5, and these are the only DDR5 sticks I have. This is 5200 megahertz, but the cool thing about this is that they're quite low profile, but you know what, in this build it doesn't really matter. You can have like dumb plats in here as well. That's, Dominator, Platinum, Corsair memory. But maybe we can do an update later if we can update the RAM as well. But at the moment we're just going to use this one, because that's all we have over here. There's two slots of DDR5, so you can use two channels. This motherboard supports 64 gigabytes maximum. We have 32 over here, but I would love to have 64 gigabytes in here. As a creator, that would really come useful. 32 is really too little. Put it on the side here now. It's gonna be easier doing it that way. Okay, once we are this way on the side over here, it's best to do some of the cable management over here. Now, another thing I want to mention is make sure that your cables don't go on the other side of the power supply in there and then get inside, like in front of the fan, so that the power supply can still draw like air from the other side. So I'm just gonna move them all like on the bottom over here and kind of make the bundle all on the bottom here. So let's plug in the RTX power. That's the big 24 pin is plugged in. Now the CPU power. Now the interesting thing here is it's only one 8-pin like kind of power connector for the CPU. Our CPU is very power hungry, so I'm interested to see how this, you know, this motherboard and this configuration handles this big chungus of a CPU power. Peeling this off on the bottom over here, and then there's thermal paste that came with the cooler. A little bit of an X, but kind of went all over the place over here. But you know what? It's always better to have more than less of this thermal paste. So as you can see, this is very large footprint of a like cooler inside here. Like the front is really just a little bit off this heatsink over here, which I'm very happy about because this fan is really going to help us like cool these heatsinks down. And then the back of the cooler over here, if you can see, is literally just like 2 millimeters off the heatsink for the chipset. Okay, so basically a lot of the motherboard components have been installed here. We're gonna have to put the riser cable now in that goes over this. But the really good thing about this Arctic cooler is that it's not just like the best cooler in the world that you can get, not just for the money, it's very affordable, but also performance-wise, it's very awesome. There's only one header that comes off from this cooler. So you can just plug that one in into the CPU header. While we are down here and the case is sideways, whoa, it's getting a bit heavy. We're gonna add the intake fans on the bottom over here. And the fans we're using are the Be Quiet light wings. And there's 2 separate versions of these 120mm light wings. These are the high speed variant. So basically you can have like normal case fans and then the ones that are high speed variant. So I went with the high speed ones because it's a small case, and if I want to kind of push a lot of air in, and these fans will let me do that. Plus they are RGB, and the RGB is very, very tasty. There's just circle rings on those. There is an ARGB hub that comes with those fans, but in our case we're just gonna daisy chain them together, then connect the RGB to the motherboard, so much simpler. Okay, the deal with these like fan headers or PWM connectors is there's only 3 on the motherboard, and one of them is just like AIO pump, which just runs 100% of the speed. But because our pump over here on the AIO is also connected to the fans on the AIO, which means that our fans are going to run 100% speed as well, which means I can't really control them. So I'm not going to use the AIO header. The CPU, you know, cooler from the AIO is going to go to the CPU fan header that has full controls. And then the other chassis fan, which is one chassis fan, I'm gonna have to use splitters, fan cable splitters, and then all the 3 fans on the bottom over there will be connected to this splitter cable over here. To be honest, I prefer the cable management in this small case than in the bigger cases. In here, there's kind of just like logic places where you can put the cables, and it kind of just makes sense where they go. And now, look at that. All the cables are tucked in on the bottom over there. Looks like quite a high-end, you know, riser cable over here. Now the included riser cable that was inside the box, actually, I prefer, in terms of the layout, I prefer this one much more because it's got actually much better kind of curve around it, how it goes. As you can see over here, it's literally just like kind of folded around there. So there's not this big kind of round thing that we have over here. But that's why this one is much bigger than this one. This is short and, you know, like goes very tightly around just that bit over there, you know, plugs in and goes on the other side like that. Looks very kind of tight. But this one is Gen 4, so I hope this is okay for this. It shouldn't matter because I'm not going to go constantly backwards and forwards with this. They're only going to be like bent once. Okay, so I think this looks very good. I have bent those quite a lot now. So like the way the cables are going to be lined up, that's how they're going to be. So now the graphics card, let's get the 3090. This is the card that's on like every single benchmark on this studio. So like this is 100% used all the time. So I'm gonna have to get this build done and then I can put it back over there. This iFixit kit is actually gonna come quite useful because I need one of those like bendy screw hole or kind of screw ends, because as you can see, we're gonna have to take these screws out over there. Let's slot the card in. Okay. Okay. I'd say this is the most awkward bit about this build. Like the rest of the things I can manage through, but just because the size of my radiator over here and how the back works, this was the like most difficult. Whew. Okay, I got this in. The only thing that feels slightly random is this bottom cover, because now once you have the like kind of fan screws in over here, it kind of pushes out from the side. So it's a little bit, this design could have been a little bit better. Okay, it's completed. It's tiny, but it's flipping awesome. So I want to plug in the power over here and then let's see if we're actually going to get a post. Oh. This looks pretty cool. Ah, there we go. Voila. 12th gen, 12900K installed, DDR5. I've got the post. So now I'm going to get a keyboard and mouse. Let's put the windows on this guy and let's configure the RGB so, you know, it actually looks nice as well. And then let's see what the performance is like. Okay then, I've got this all set up over here. We've got the windows going on. So let's have a look a little bit of the hardware. How does it perform? Now, I'm not going to run the full benchmarks of this because basically 3090, 12900K and 64 gigabytes of RAM that you can get in here. I've done this on my channel before. If you just look at the 12900K, you know, review, then all the benchmarks will be there. We're going to start with Cinebench R23 because that's like very intensive multi-core test for the CPU. We're pulling 240 watts from the socket and our CPU is 87C in here. Now it's a little bit loud over there because I've measured it so that it will like pull quite a bit of, you know, air from the bottom when we are about 87 or something like that. But this 240 watts like Cinebench run or Blender run, it's, you know, not very natural, you know, so if you are going to be rendering this, then, you know, expect your PC to be a little bit louder. But looking at the cooler, we're keeping up quite all right. Like in the high 80s, okay, we hit 90 now. I guess the liquid's warming up. While we're running over here, another thing I noticed in this chassis over here is that there is like a little mesh on the top over here as well. Like a little filter type of thing, but I'm not sure why the filter is there because you don't want to filter the air that's coming out. You just want to blow the air out. If there's dust and stuff inside, you want to like get it all out. So if you want to do a little bit of DIY, you can actually just get this filter and then just pull it off, something like that. Then the air can like come through much better. But how good is it in terms of cooling this 12900K and 241 watts of power? 94 will pulling like maximum at the moment, but constantly roughly around high 80s, 90s. It's 20.3 degrees in the room here at the moment. So I'm actually happy with it. This is quite all right, and I know it looks like high, you know, very, you know, hot, but this is just what this CPU does. It's ridiculously hot. It pulls 240 through the socket. It's absolutely mental. So I'm doing also the CPU burner test here on Firmac, and then looking now here, this doesn't pull as much wattage through, like 226, 225, something like that, so about 20 less. And then we're just sitting there about 94. Even the bigger PCs, like, do you remember the ProArt build that we did behind there with the big Fantex P600S chassis with double, you know, the fans on the radiator? We got a little bit of a better, you know, result, but the cooler is like twice the price and the fans are twice the price as well. So the price is getting really up there, and we're only saving maybe, you know, a few degrees here and there. 100% load through the GPU. While we're doing that, I ran the SSD benchmarks for the OS drive that we have for the C drive. And look at that, sequential read speed of 7,000 megabytes per second and write speeds 5.8 thousand megabytes per second. That's absolutely ridiculous. The read and writes are very good as well. So if you're wanting something very high end that also is kind of affordable, you know, compared to some of the other things, then this Team Group A440 is absolutely amazing drive for that. At the moment, the GPU is like 65, 66 degrees, something like that. And I can feel like warm air coming up. And this is kind of the only downside of this kind of chimney layout of the PC. If you're doing something very graphically intensive, then your CPU temperature is just naturally going to rise a little bit. So in idle at the moment, I am idling roughly around 38, 40 degrees, somewhere around there, with only pulling 25 watts from the socket, which is a little bit to the warmer side. And it's only because I can feel the GPU, you know, air being pushed up over there and pushed out from the top, which means it just heats the radiator up there a little bit, which isn't ideal really. But if you're doing a creative workflow or working together with like Premiere Pro and, you know, some other things, then it's not going to run like 66 degrees, the GPU, which means it's not going to heat this up. But just if you're doing something like, you know, rendering overnight or doing that, then it might heat up the CPU a little bit as well. Obviously, you could like put the CPU fans to work a little bit louder and make the fans working a little bit faster. But my goal over here was to just make it a little bit quieter, so I can just put the PC on the side and kind of just keep working, not worry about it. And it's going to do its job. It might run slightly hotter, but it's still like way within the limits of the GPU or CPU power limits. So there wouldn't be any problem with that. So the memory is 100 degrees at the moment, which is quite hottish. The memory can go like 110 or something like that, so we don't need to worry about until we get there. GPU hotspot is about 77.8 degrees over there. So let's see if something changes if I take this like top cover off and let a little bit of more air through, because this is quite warm over here. Let it just like kind of climb through. It's a little bit of like a heat furnace over here. Okay, I've just turned the bottom fans up a little bit so that the bottom fans start like cooling the GPU a little bit better as well, pulling the cool air in. Whoa, look, that made a big difference over here. As you can see here, there's a dip in performance in terms of the heat. And it's cooling down, cooling down, cooling down. Now even the memory went down to like 98 degrees over there. I've just turned the bottom fans on slightly so you can hear a little bit of a whiz of fans. And just in perspective, the GPU is pulling 350 watts at the moment. We are at 64 degrees, which is just really, really good. If you think about that, our CPU is pulling only 240 watts and we're like in 90 degrees, but just the GPU has like a massive heatsink and everything. Look at that, it's completely fine. The GPU hotspot has gone down a few degrees as well, but we're roughly gonna like hover around 64, 65 degrees now when the fan speed's like just pushing this up, and our memory chips are 98 degrees as well. Now, as a creator, I don't think you really need to worry about that. Only when you're rendering or something like that, you know, you leave it rendering. What I would do is just hit those fan curves from Armory Crate and then just kind of, you know, it just helps your GPU to run a little bit cooler, and that's much better. Look at these, my memory chips are actually going down now at 96, 98, so they're quite hottish, but they're not like 100 degrees hot. So a few degrees we save there by just adding like a few hundred RPM for the bottom fans. So the maximum over there, we roughly hit about 67 degrees, 68 degrees. Maybe we're gonna hit 70 degrees if it's a little bit warmer in the room. Look, we're heating the room up. It's 21 degrees now in the room. So in terms of thermal performance, I'm still quite happy with this, considering this is such a small form factor and we have put literally like the worst performing heat components inside there. So I'm super happy. During this time, we also finished the secondary SSD benchmark, which is on the back of the motherboard, remember? And look at that, 5,000 megabytes per second read and 4.2 gigabytes per second write speed. So it just shows that both of these slots are capable of running PCIe 4.0 speeds, like full fat, as fast as you want. But as you can see, even with this board over here, we're power delivering absolutely fine. GPU is now gone even further down. It's like less than 65 degrees and 98, 96 degrees on the memory chips. That's interesting. If I hit the CPU burner over here, we're hitting like 90 or 100 degrees quite quickly. I think it's just because we're still pushing the warm like GPU air up. But if you're looking at the VRMs here, we're roughly about 50 degrees. That's maximum. I'll run this now for 5, 10, something like that minutes. The CPU is 100 degrees on this, and that's just because like that's how good this cooling is going to be for this chip. Like any 360mm AIO you're going to put on there, you really are going to see this. Now we have a little bit of an issue that we are pushing like the warm air through the radiator, but that's the best case you can get because it's such a small form factor. Now if you're wanting to save a little bit of money and maybe lose a little bit of performance, I highly recommend you go with the 12700K, and that doesn't boost that high, and then suddenly this cooling for this chip is going to be very, very good. Now I'm hoping to get one of those chips in so I can really show you like how good this chip is, but I have tested the 12700, which is the non-K version. It's cheaper than Ryzen 9 5900X, and actually in most of the video editing performances or tests, it actually surpasses the 5900X, so it's very good. So I expect the 12700K to do even better because it can boost that high, 180 watts, even longer. So cooling performance, I think I'm happy with it, knowing that these are the worst case scenario parts over here. If you're going with anything less, you don't really need to worry about that. I still think that this cooler is like the best you should be going for, or what you can get, because it's just such a big radiator and the pump, and it just works really, really well. In terms of the fans, I am quite happy with the Be Quiet fans on the bottom over there because they're very quiet, and when you want to, they can be very like performance fans as well, go very, very high. I think they go like 2,500 RPM. They do make a bit of noise when they are running at 2.5K, RPM, but I'd rather have that than just capping them at whatever and just have silent. So I can tell my PC that if it's ramping up, it's hot, the fans can do that, and the fans are capable of keeping up with the cooling. Now, if you wanted to, you could upgrade the included fans on the Arctic cooler to like the Be Quiet ones as well, and get the Be Quiet on the top, and then you get kind of these glow fans on the bottom there and on the up there. You have a little bit more cable management to do that way, but I think you're probably going to get a little bit of a better performance just because the fans are working a little bit faster. The included Arctic fans aren't that fast and not so good in performance, but very, very affordable. So altogether, I think this is the best Creator PC, like small form factor PC case system, because it is able to accommodate quite a lot of things. Very large GPU, as you can see, I'm running a 3090 and I can put any type of GPU in there, no problem. I have quite fast USB ports for the motherboard, the B660i, USB type A and type C, even one of them like 20 gigabits in the back over there, as well as the front panel over here. I have like one on the top, USB type A and type C on the top. The ideal situation over here would be to have 10 gigabit Ethernet somehow here as well, but unfortunately, with this ITX case, we can't really do that. I don't know any ITX motherboards who has that. Now, it would be nice to have another PCIe slot or somehow to, expand it to that. I guess you could somehow get like the back M.2 like extension, because that's like X4 M.2 slot. You could exchange that to somehow convert it to 10 gigabit Ethernet, but where would you be putting it? I don't know. Altogether, I think this is a very nice system. Now the case is a little bit of an expensive side, but it's small. It looks very fantastic. It's very high quality, like everything is aluminium, everything works. It just looks really, really good as well. Minimalistic type of thing. I like how it looks from the top as well. It just looks fantastic. You can even accommodate like a hard drive on the front over there, as well as another 2.5 SSD over there. So you could get even your 4, slot storage system going, like I mentioned in one of the previous videos, if you are a video creator, or if you're a photographer, even better. Just leave this 12900K in there, put a little bit of a slower or worse GPU in there, maybe like a RTX 3050 or something like that, and then you have your PC. Anyway, whatever creative workflow you are doing, the thing is, this case and this configuration of things gives you a lot of different options how you want to do this. Look at this little glow over there. If we make it like dark, you can see a little blue glow underneath. I just really, really like this. It's small, it's cute, it's very powerful. I don't know. Do you get that I really, really like this build? I hope you do. If you want to pick up any of those parts, I'm gonna leave them in the description below, so you can actually purchase them yourself, and it will take you to a shop where you can get them. They are affiliate links, so if you do purchase any of those parts, I get a small commission, so thanks very much. Likes if you enjoyed it, subs if you'd like to see more, and I'll meet you in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.